Hello everyone, this is Storydive back again breaking down another episode of American Gods. This time, the Season 2 finale, Episode 8, titled Moonshadow. I thought this one was one of the stronger episodes of the season, and definitely a strong finale, although it was slower paced than some earlier episodes. There were moments in this episode that were quite beautiful and contemplative, sort of reminded me of a Terrence Malick film. I can't say I liked it as much as the previous episode, but I thought this one did a great job of delving more into the meaning of the themes of this series and gave us a better understanding of how everything works and where it can potentially go. There was also a very big reveal at the end, which I'll get to, but like last time, I'm going to go over the entire episode, break it down, and point out all the Easter eggs and references I noticed. And if you haven't seen the episode yet, there will be spoilers, major spoilers, I might add, from this episode in this video. So let's get started. The show opens with an old-timey television logo reminiscent of the early days of television, one of the early forms of the New God media. The Folks broadcasting service is probably a parody of Fox. On Halloween night in 1938, at a farm in Trenton, New Jersey that is watched over by a creepy scarecrow, a man reads the paper while his family enjoy the evening. The paper prominently features an article about the recent Munich Agreement, and on the radio we hear Orson Welles' famous radio play, War of the Worlds, which convinced many American citizens that the country was in fact being invaded by aliens from Mars. And this family are 3 of those citizens.
Keep looking at it, it's so awful. Its eyes are black and they gleam like a serpent.
As the camera pulls into the radio, another early manifestation of media, Mr. World begins talking to us. He uses the War of the Worlds broadcast as an example of the power of fear, describing the concept that many of us have become accustomed to during the series, that thought can manifest into reality. Thoughts brought on by fear are the most potent of these.
What made it real is the fear that it could exist.
As Mr. World speaks of the power of fear, we see him directing a sci-fi television program in 1950, and according to the slate, he goes by the name C.J. Byrne. These scenes are from the 1956 film Invasion of the Flying Saucers, but I think they are meant to be a sci-fi TV program or TV movie created by Mr. World. A young boy watches the program directed by Mr. World and fears his dog will get abducted by the UFOs in the program. Outside, he runs after the dog, past Mr. World, who hangs there as a scarecrow on the farm. I believe the scarecrow is a kind of personification of fear. Then the boy is abducted by a UFO, a physical manifestation from the television program that Mr. World directed. The images that Mr. World created were made real in the minds of the viewers, and now he controls them. Back at the Ibis and Jekyll funeral parlor in the present, Ibis prepares the body of Matt Sweeney. Shadow lays on a grave in a nearby graveyard and has a vivid dream, which meshes together pieces of recent events, the killing of Sweeney and Sweeney's words of warning to him. There's also an image of a man's hand playing with a coin, and on his wrist is a bracelet covered in runic symbols. But one rune, called the Volknut, or Knot of the Slain, glows quite prominently. The name Volknut is a modern term given to the much older Germanic symbol, of which the original name is not known, but the rune is commonly associated with Odin. It's sometimes called Odin's Triangles, and some scholars believe it represents Odin's mental binds, or spells. So, likely this bracelet is a magical object, which gives the wearer power, and we'll get back to the wearer later. In episode 6, when Donar broke Gungnir, we saw this rune shooting out from the spear, so it likely represented breaking the spear's spell. In another shot, we can see several runes carved into Yggdrasil, including the Volknut, which is again prominently displayed and glowing. Shadow reaches for a specific branch of Yggdrasil, on which we can see the glowing Otala rune. This rune represents ancestry or ancestral inheritance. Shadow hears Sweeney from the previous episode describing the rope around his neck, and near the end of the dream, he sees Laura. All of these images, of course, are very foreshadowing, some of which will be revealed in this episode. Other elements are revealed in the novel, but will probably be revealed in Season 3 of the series. Before Shadow wakes, we see Wednesday quickly leaving the funeral parlor in Betty, but when Shadow does wake, he sees Laura laying beside him. At Z-Com, I finally know how to say that now because they say it later in this episode, the CEO from episode 4 wakes to a tiny dot bouncing back and forth on his screen, much like the classic video game Pong. Then he hears and sees his father's metronome, which inspires him with the code he needs to create Tech Boy 2.0. At the graveyard, Laura lays beside Shadow and says she wants to make amends, but the problem is she feels nothing. Shadow tells Laura that he killed Sweeney, although he didn't mean to do it, and Laura tries to convince him to turn against Wednesday. But Shadow's mind is elsewhere. He recalls the day in the park when he received his nickname, Puppy, from Laura. As he sits up, we see the crypt lid he was laying on has the words, "She hath done what she could," which is a common inscription for graves, but in this case it perhaps is a reference to Laura, and though she means well toward Shadow, her apathy and self-hate always lead her down the wrong path. Shadow asks Laura not to call him Puppy anymore. He is no longer the same person, no longer her puppy. Then Laura says she's going to kill Wednesday and asks if Shadow will stop her, but Shadow doesn't give an answer. At ZCOM, the CEO speaks with Techboy 2.0. Techboy describes the imperfections of humanity and asks why the CEO created him. The CEO quotes Genesis and the story of Jacob wrestling the angel, which is used as an analogy for wrestling with God. The CEO has challenged God by creating something far beyond humanity, but even he doesn't seem to fully understand why.
I will not let you go until you bless me.
Shadow leaves the graveyard, and for a second time we get a rather prominent shot of snails, the significance of which I'm not sure. Snails can represent different things to different cultures, but because Shadow is near a funeral parlor run by Egyptian gods, it's likely a reference to the way the ancient Egyptians saw the symbol of the snail, usually a symbol of evolution, growth, and thought, so perhaps it's a reference to where Shadow's character is at this moment, and the changes he will soon make. In the greenhouse, Laura speaks with Bilquis and attempts to enlist her help in killing Wednesday. During the conversation, Bilquis holds an apple. Perhaps because Bilquis seems to be on a Christianity kick, it represents the fruit from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which Adam and Eve tasted, and maybe in a way Bilquis is the serpent tempting Laura with it. During the conversation, Laura also nudges Sweeney's blood on the floor with her boot, perhaps foreshadowing that she intends to use it for her resurrection potion. At ZCOM, the CEO elaborates further on his intentions with Techboy 2.0 to craft order and meaning out of the chaos of the universe, write the chaos into a narrative, a story, then describes the sacrifices he has made to create a tech god. And these are again references to sacrifice holding currency. Techboy, however, has his own plans. He touches the CEO on the hip, another reference to the wrestling match between Jacob and the angel, and this sends a kind of shockwave through the CEO. I'm not sure exactly what it accomplishes, but perhaps in this moment, Techboy downloads everything in the CEO. Techboy says that in actuality, the gods are made in the image of man, not the other way around. He then overrides ZCOM's system and uses it to pull all banking and ATM systems offline, as well as many others, and then appears beside Mr. World in the bunker. In Cairo, Salim notices the banking crisis and goes back to the funeral parlor to tell everyone. Shadow picks up one of Sweeney's coins that he pulled from the hoard, and inscribed on it we see the symbol of a sun, likely a reference to the Celtic sun god Luch, aka Sweeney, and his son's treasure. New media frames Shadow and Wednesday for a recent massacre, broadcasting the news all over television. This causes Salim a great deal of distress, but the gods brush it off, barely paying him or the news any mind. Mr. Nancy tells Ibis to
get a move on, Birdbeak. The Druid Kings await!
The Druids were the priest class of the ancient Celts, and thus their kings will be waiting for the Celtic god Sweeney in the afterlife. Ibis and Mr. Nancy vaguely discuss Mr. Wednesday's grand scheme. They both seem to know exactly what Wednesday is up to, but don't reveal anything to Shadow, who is listening in. At a restaurant somewhere in America, people are freaking out about Techboy's cyber attack, but much like he did in the greenhouse in the last episode, Wednesday simply enjoys his meal. For him, this is just another day at the office. Ibis and Nancy discuss the forthcoming battle as they play chess. Mr. Nancy accuses Ibis of losing his edge in Cairo, saying that death comes too easily to him here, and what they really need is a revolution.
Solutions. It's gonna take a revolution. Alright.
But Ibis disagrees. It seems like one of the reasons Nancy is helping Wednesday is that he wants to cause massive amounts of chaos, to shake up the country and bring on a revolution, one that will allow worship dedicated to him to thrive, of course. As Shadow attempts to leave, he is interrupted by Bilquis, who is wearing only a red cloth that she quickly sheds, and I can't show you much of the scene for that reason. She says that she and Shadow's fortunes are linked, kisses him, and gives him what looks like a version of the Christian sacrament, confirmation. She seems to be making the sign of the cross in blood on his forehead, and as she does so, she says, "Find out who you are." I'm guessing this is Bilquis' own blood, and in a way she's baptizing Shadow in it, linking him to her personal cult or sect. correct. The Jinn shows up at the funeral parlor looking for Salim. He intends to help him escape so that he will no longer be a target for the new gods, and for good measure checks Nancy in the game of chess. But it's too late. New media adds Salim to the list of suspects, and the authorities already know their location. As the FBI quickly approach, Shadow grabs some money with the intention of leaving, and finally meets New Media, who reintroduces her new form to him.
Well, let me tell you, Shadow Moon, we haven't had the pleasure yet, wouldn't you say, Joe?
That's right, Melinda.
Speaking through the talking heads on the television, like the old media, several news anchors begin reciting Orson Welles' War of the Worlds play that we heard earlier, illustrating that modern media is more or less the same as it was during Welles' broadcast, a fiction that inspires fear, the most powerful engine of belief. This also parallels what Ibis said in the previous episode: stories are truer than the truth. Reality is what you believe it to be. As the FBI surround the funeral parlor, Salim reaffirms that he will stay with the Jinn, come what may, and even gets a kiss, which I'm sure he enjoyed. Shadow attempts to scoot out the greenhouse, but is dragged back by Yggdrasil, at which point he is assaulted by a wave of memories, many of which highlighting the many hints that Wednesday has been dropping him since the first season, and almost all pointing to one thing: that Shadow is Wednesday's son. Damn, does it feel good that I can finally say that now, because on pretty much every video I've made about American Gods, I've had like 100 comments stating this, and I never responded to or acknowledged any of them because I was trying not to spoil it for the people out there who haven't read the novel. So for those of you who haven't read the novel, they do reveal in the novel that Shadow is Wednesday's son, and this is why Wednesday chose Shadow in the beginning. The exact reasons why are still a spoiler, but I will reveal that Wednesday needs someone of his own blood. Shadow was never just some guy in a bar, his fate was orchestrated from the beginning. Amid this montage of shots, we see the shot of the hand with the bracelet that we saw earlier. This is Shadow's memory of the mysterious man that he met in the hospital waiting room while his mother was sick. It, of course, is Wednesday, who is visiting his ex while she's sick. After making this monumentous realization in his own mind, Shadow uses an axe to hack through the tree, breaking through to the backstage we saw in the first episode of Season 2, the area that Bilquis said was in Wednesday's mind, but I think the light on Shadow's forehead during the carousel scene, combined with this scene, gives us a pretty good idea that it was in fact Shadow's mind. Shadow then sees himself on the beach of the backstage as a child, and is transported back to his youth. Shadow plays with toy soldiers who surround a toy house, which parallel the FBI who are now storming the funeral parlor. But the young Shadow wipes the figures from the board, and in doing so pulls himself and Yggdrasil through the backstage, and likely removes all the FBI agents from the quote board unquote. At ZCOM, the CEO, who is now for the first time named Mr. Z, cannot help the FBI agents with the massive hack. He says the only thing they can do now is pray. Techboy 2.0, who he created, is now far beyond him. He wrestled with God and lost. The Jinn prepares to leave the funeral parlor with Salim, and says goodbye to Ibis, who refers to the Jinn as Sisyphus, the king of ancient Greek mythology, cursed to continually roll a boulder uphill, only for it to roll down again and have to repeat the process. In this case, I think the boulder Ibis is referring to is Salim. Laura carries Sweeney's body, where to and why I'm not sure, but she still hasn't used the resurrection potion Baron Samedi gave her, so I hope in the next season she'll use it on him. Mr. World watches the attacks unfold and says,
"The dreams of order yield to the natural state of things. Chaos."
Like Techboy, who defied his father, Mr. Z, in his attempt to control and order the world, Mr. World is on the side of chaos. Mr. World drinks wine as he watches the chaos, perhaps another reference to a Christian sacrament, and in the next shot, Wednesday does so as well, saying,
"My boy's gonna be just fine."
He's referring to Shadow, but you knew that. In the final scene, police stop the bus Shadow is on and check his ID, which has somehow been changed to Michael Einsel, resident of Lakeside, Wisconsin. Michael Einsel is the false name Shadow uses in the novel while hiding out in the small town of Lakeside, and attempting to hide from the reach of the new gods. A rather big portion of the book takes place in Lakeside, so I suspect this will be the location of the entire third season. And in this small town, we will meet the mysterious Hinzelman, an important character in the book. But that's the end of the episode and the end of the season. Like I said, I thought this was a strong episode. Not my favorite of the season, probably not even my second favorite, but still, it had a lot of intrigue and interesting elements, and I thought it was well directed. I'm still very much into the story, and I want to see where they will go next. But I'm not going to get much into Season 3 predictions in this video. I will do a separate video later dedicated exclusively to that, where I can discuss potential spoilers in the series from the book, and be sure to join me for another series based on a game and book, Good Omens. I will be covering that series when it premieres on May 31st. So please stay tuned for that. If you noticed an Easter egg I missed, or if I got something wrong, please let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, check out these other videos about American Gods. Thank you to everyone who watched all 8 of my American Gods Season 2 breakdown videos. I really enjoy doing these. Thanks for watching. Until next time.